So you think back to when you were a young boy or a young girl. I was never a young girl, so I'm not quite sure how they feel. I'm not going to speak on their behalf, but think back to when you were a young boy or child. And remember how you used to, around September, perhaps you would start thinking about Christmas. And remember how you would dream of having something special, something that you had desired. Perhaps something you'd seen in a magazine or an Argos catalogue. I don't know, something like a remote controlled car or something like that. Or it could be anything. Take your pick. And you'd look at it in the magazine and you'd just stare at the picture of this thing, and you'd read all about it, and you really felt that you weren't complete until you had this thing, and that there was a glimpse of a possibility with Christmas coming that you might get it. As the time drew on, you kind of heard a rumour that you were going to get it, and the excitement was just, you were at fever pitch. You kind of basing your entire existence sort of waiting for this morning where you could open that. And the day comes, and there it is, the big box. Pull that paper open, and there it is. You own it. It's in your hands. You can't believe it. You're very impatient, but in the afternoon you manage to take it outside, and you start playing with it. And it is great. It is fun. But after a few days, all that excitement, that anticipation has dissipated. And there is a little sense, isn't there? A little sense of disappointment. Kind of realise that actually your life hasn't changed quite as much as your imagination suggested it might do. And eventually, often not long afterwards, you rarely get that remote control car or whatever it is out until it's forgotten. That's what ambition is. That's exactly the same thing. That we have this idea in our imaginations that somehow everything is going to be different once we've achieved them. And when we achieve them, we soon find out, often within hours, that nothing's changed. And that the anticipation of achieving that ambition was the kind of driving force, really, behind it. I remember when I got my degree, and I think like a lot of young people, when they go to university, sometimes to try and it's an ambition, but it's also slightly to impress one's parents. It's another completely understandable rationale for any goal or ambition. And so you spend 3 or 4 years, depending on where you are, doing your degree, and you finally, you go through the final exams, you get the piece of paper, you maybe got a good degree. And I remember doing that, and I thought, well, this is probably the first thing I've ever done, which my father would be kind of proud of. And I remember telling him, and it barely registered with him, actually. Now, he was going through a bit of a tough time in himself then, but even so, you devote 3 or 4 years to something thinking that there'll be that kind of emotional payoff, and it's not there, and it never was going to be there. Because it's something that you can't really expect in the real world. that you're going to get the response that your kind of imagination dreamed of. But yeah, well, there you go. I mean, we can't live without goals and ambitions, but we do need to be careful, because we devote decades to these things. And as I said, there is a big question mark over whether payoff is worth it. I mean, without wanting to sound sort of too sort of bucolic, if you like, or of the countryside, that the animals don't really need endless goals and ambitions, do they? Like in the mental sense that we do. They need to wake up. They do need to collect food. But it's the same ambition every day. It's the same functional reflex every day. Like my functional reflex, what would that be? Well, I mean, it would be to stretch my legs and to go outside and to, I guess, have a paddle in the ocean, or a little walk around in the forest. Grab something to eat. And as the sun set, relax, with a book and a candle or a film, and go to sleep. Not this endless waves of having to sort of achieve things in the world as such, in competition with my peers. And that's the difference between, this is what Epicurus talked about, isn't it? Because he said that you had basic needs, and it's important to fulfill those needs. Just like the squirrel needs the nuts. You do need friendship. You do need companionship if you can get it. It's not that easy these days. If you can get it, it's nice. You do need, it would be nice to have a bit of intimacy. It's pretty good to have food on the table, even if it's peasant food, like lentil soup and, bread and cheese. That's quite nice. But he also distinguished between those kind of things and what he thought were the false ambitions and desires, which were the sort of things I've been talking about before: wealth, fame, power. They don't satisfy in the end. I have to always qualify this by saying that I also can't stand poverty. There's no celebration in poverty. But there's a difference between, being able to live a reasonable life and spending 20, 30 years trying to accumulate ridiculous amounts of money that you can't ever possibly spend just for the sake of it. Well, if you want to do that, it's up to you, but certainly don't do that out of a sense of fear. And then there's these Stoics who said that, we shouldn't be thinking about these external achievements at all anyway. Every single external achievement, like the one I just talked about when I got my degree, or the guy with the remote control car, and, I'm using those as kind of little versions of sort of being a man or a woman in the world and dedicating years and years to goals and achievements which don't make any real sense. They fade. Once you've achieved them, the feelings fade and you're left empty. I think a lot of this is to do with kind of inventing things to do all the time, inventing busyness. It's just pure distraction. It's distraction from the fear of the abyss, from the fear of looking into the void of one's own existence. And one's own existence doesn't really have anything to do with the noise on the internet, or the sort of infantile culture that we exist in. It's a fairly solitary, quite difficult thing to really deal with, and so we don't deal with it. I guess this is really at the heart of what I've been trying to say for the last few videos I've done. I mean, eventually I will come to the other half of the sort of thing that I'm interested in, which is not only sort of chronicling the decline of society because of accelerated technology and the sadness of being haunted by a future that we were promised that never came, a golden future, a kind of, a slightly utopian future. We were promised all these things, they never came. We could have had them, the blueprint was there. We'd rejected them. I'm interested in why we rejected them and why we're so stupid as to reject them. But I'm also interested in the other side of it, which is the coping strategies, because all of this noise is often it's either trying to understand something which can't be understood very easily, and we want to understand things, or it is coping strategies. So everything is a kind of coping strategy. And one of those coping strategies is distracting ourselves and being busy and having endless goals and ambitions and to-do lists. Because without them, we slip into that abyss, don't we? We slip into that void. Who am I? What am I doing here? I find that very peculiar. I mean, I understand, you see, when you're young, yes, you've got this huge reserve of energy and you should use it to provide yourself with a good, safe life. I mean, we live in a world which is very delicate, it's a kind of really difficult to achieve even the most sort of modicum of comfort in this world. You have to work extremely hard just to have the basics. That's the kind of world we've built, and I understand that. But once you're in a situation where you are a little bit more comfortable and you could step back and prepare for your eternal oblivion. Often people don't. They just keep going and keep going, inventing to-do lists. It never stops. They can never stop. They do it on the deathbed. So there's no final goal that's going to bring you any salvation. I'm telling you that. It's only going to lead to despair. But we have this compulsion, don't we? It's a compulsion. There's nothing wrong, I suppose, with kind of, creating a life for yourself is a great thing. I'm talking about the gold at the end of a rainbow that we've invented. That's what I'm talking about. Embracing the point. If there is a meaning to life, it's about embracing the struggle, isn't it? It's about accepting. This is why I'm not prepared to go down the normal route and just try and talk about be positive, find solutions, live life, love. That's everywhere else. I'm not interested in that. I just think that's complete bullshit. We need to embrace the struggle. It is a struggle. And first, to embrace it, you need to accept it. You need to accept it to the point where you literally fall to your knees at the enormity of it, at the horror of it. And then once you've fallen to your knees, in other words, that I'm talking metaphorically, but you need to understand it. Once you understand it, you're immune, because you can never feel self-pity for yourself, because you will always accept that this is the human condition, and that you're not unique in suffering, a breakup or a job loss or, irritating difficulties on a daily basis. And you won't feel singled out and isolated by that. So yeah, it's once you've accepted the struggle and that it's normal and it's tragic at the same time. I mean, I don't want to underplay how awful the realization is. That you are literally living in a sort of Shakespearean tragedy. Then you embrace it. And how do you embrace it? Well, you don't do what everybody else says, and you don't try and cure it, overcome it, transcend it. You don't. There's no point in any of that. It's never going to work. You can't break out of reality. Even though we've got a society which suggests that that's all there is to do, is to try and break out, often using expensive tools so to do. We just have to literally take that bloody heavy stone and we put it on our backpack and we keep walking. I mean, that's the only way to do it. Just like that guy, what was his name? Can't remember. The guy, the ancient, was it the ancient Greek god who pushed the stone up the hill, and every time he got to the top, it sort of rolled back, and he kept doing it over and over again. And you could see that as a sort of form of torture, or you could see that as an incredibly meaningful, satisfying life, just struggling on, never giving up, keep going day after day, whatever. I can tell you that no matter what you're trying to achieve, within 5 minutes of achieving it, you're back to that baseline, and here we go again, I mean, I've experienced this much myself, I've written quite a lot of stuff and had it published, and then once you've had it, you spend 2 years working on something, on a book or something, and then the book comes, and it's quite exciting when it comes through the door from the post, at the first time you get a copy from the printers or something, and I don't know, within a couple of days it's on the bookshelf, you've forgotten about it. I think most creative artists feel the same thing, that once the work is done, it's dead. It's dead to them. So I would focus on, instead of focusing on ambitions and goals, I would focus on growth, connection, experience. Those are things which I think are worth focusing on. And I'm not saying this to decry anybody who is highly ambitious. That's absolutely fine. Everybody has their own right to get through life any way they see fit. But some people might, as I said, want to think about the reality of success, bearing in mind they may spend decades trying to achieve it, or years. Maybe, in many ways, they are already successful.